Good afternoon. How are y'all doing? Good. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday afternoon for our Social Justice Speaker Series featuring Candice Matthews Brackeen. My name is Karlos L. Marshall, and I'm proud to serve as your Chief Diversity Officer here at the Dayton Metro Library. Launched this year, our Social Justice Speaker Series is comprised of unique, award-winning, and professional speakers. Through this initiative, community members can listen, learn, and discuss some of the most critical social justice issues of today, as our speakers provide insights from their professional fields and personal journeys. Today, we are joined by Candice Matthews. Candice is general partner at Lightship Capital, where she finds and funds high-growth, minority-led companies operating in underserved ecosystems throughout the Midwest. Launched in 2020, Lightship Capital is raising $50 million for investments into underserved founders operating in the CPG, e-commerce, sustainability, artificial intelligence, and healthcare spaces. Candice is also the founder and CEO at Lightship Foundation, the inclusion-focused entrepreneur enrichment program guiding minority founders with instruction in product development, brand building, leveraging artificial intelligence for business and fundraising. Candice expands upon her work driving representation and innovation with her role on the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium for NASA, where she leads diversity of thought as new cultures and economies are developed. She also sits on advisory committee and selection committees for technology for The Ohio State University and Cincinnati Children's Hospital and Medical Center, ensuring that technology is commercialized from these entities and that diversity is at the forefront of decision making. So with that being said, please give me a warm Dayton welcome for Candice Matthews. So how are you doing today, and how has your flight into Dayton been?
I wish it was a flight, but it's okay.
Okay.
It was easy 15-hour drive to get here. So randomly my flight canceled last night out of New York, and so the kids and I drove from vacation here.
All right.
I live in Cincinnati though, so it'll be easy to get home.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you being here with your busy schedule. So with that, just wanted to start and ask, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the community of venture fundraising and venture capital.
This could be a little bit of a long story, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I feel like if anybody is around my age, they remember Saturday Night Live, and there was those two ladies, they were on like the radio and they talked to everyone. Does anyone remember that? They'd be like, good times. I feel like that right now. So I'm originally from Toledo, Ohio. I come from a pretty humble upbringing. So like many moms, teen mom, she had me when she was 19. I was her second child. And I come from a family of kind of that's his, hers, and ours. So there's 6 of us, 5 boys, and me. It was a rather challenging experience as a child. I come from a loud house where my mother was rather loud. She struggled with alcoholism, and I just wanted to be out of the house. And so that's what I did. I joined every club. I did everything that I could have possibly done to be gone. And I think that's what got me to where I am today. So spent a lot of time with, cheerleading, religious council at school, leadership roles as treasurer in my high school class. And then my junior year, my next door neighbor, State Senator Linda Fernie, reached out, just came next door and said, hey, I'd love to teach you more about what happens at the State House. I'd love to start taking you around, because she didn't have any children of her own. And she could probably sometimes hear how loud it was at my house. And she started taking me to the theater. And those were things that I wasn't able to do. And so she was, I think, my first mentor, and mentored me toward going to college. Started at Bowling Green State University. It was a little too close to home. I loved it there. But it was a little too close to home. Because my mom showed up one weekend and I was like, no, we're not doing this. And then decided to go to the University of Cincinnati. At the time, I thought I maybe wanted to be a teacher or a nurse, because that's what I had seen on TV. and got through my first year and realized, like, I don't like other people's children. Kids are great, I've got my own, but like other people's kids just was not my jam. And started taking my electives, and started taking Econ 101, and I thought, man, this is it. Like, other people in my class were like, this is a really hard class. And I was like, I love economics. Then I got to 102, and I thought, oh, this is like my favorite thing. And my professor, Debashis Pal, who is one of my greatest friends and allies today, came to me and said, we have a scholarship for first-generation college students. You should apply. And so I got what's now called the Kautz-Jubel Fellowship. That paid for the rest of my college education, books, travel, a stipend, and it allowed me to kind of expand and see the world. We started in those classes at UC studying businesses. And so we did lots of business cases where we would look at a company, figure out what their challenges were, and figure out really, truly, like, how we could make small tweaks in the business to help it grow. And I was doing that as a 21, 22-year-old person, and I think that's what gave me the building blocks to do what I do today. So graduated from school, and I had choices, like I could go, get a master's degree, or I could go and work at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And if you know anything about me, I struggle to sit still. I can't sit still, you guys. And so I decided to consult with some of the professors and TAs from the University of Cincinnati. So for almost 13 years, I was a consultant, going to small to medium-sized businesses and helping them to fix their business challenges. Many times it was restructuring the corporation, and so I did that repeatedly. And then through that process, through that time period, I married my first husband. We had 2 children, and I was a work-from-home mom. Not only did I do that consulting during the day, but in the wee hours of the morning and in the evenings, I ran a women's fitness studio in Cincinnati. I had a staff and ran that for several years. That was like my first business outside of the consulting. And then back in 2014, I was dropping one of my sons off from school, and I ran into another mom, and she's like, hey, I wonder if your son wants to go on a play date. And I said, sure. She's like, here's my number. And so I texted her, she didn't answer. Kids are tenacious, and they're like, when are we gonna get together for this play date? And so it took us like almost a month, like, to figure it out. And we finally did. And on the day I was supposed to pick him up from this play date, I knock on the door, and the mom wasn't there. And so there was a child care provider, so there's a nanny there. And I was like, hey, where's my son? And she's like, oh, he's somewhere around the house. And it's like a really big house. It's like a 10,000 square foot house. So this lady just goes back and like starts watching the soap opera. And I'm like walking around their house looking for my kid. I finally find him, and he's playing Call of Duty with his friend online. He was a kindergartner. And if you've ever like listened to online games, there was like a lot of flowery language. And his little friend was sitting next to him, and his little tiny kindergarten voice shouting at the TV. And I could see him still in my head, like, and he's shouting, that's BS, like the real words. And I was like, yeah, it is, you guys, like it is. So we left, and I realized that I hadn't shared enough information with the other parent. And from that, sparked the idea to launch a small tech company called Hello Parent, a mobile app to help parents connect and organize activities like playdates and Mom's Night Out. We became national partners with the Brady campaign to reduce gun violence, as well as the National Swim Association to make certain that children stayed safe when they were around and in pools. And we grew that at 8451, which is a data science firm for Kroger, because Mom is the #1 buyer in the household with almost, I think, now $2.7 trillion in buying power. So we raised some venture capital. And as we ran out of venture capital, an article came out, or actually a paper came out called Project Diane. And Project Diane basically said that at that point, only 88 black women in the country had ever raised any venture capital. And I was like, so I'm one of 88 people, and are you serious? Like, to that point, I hadn't hit any brick walls in my life. And I was like, how do I fix this? So we ran out of capital as an organization. And I looked around my ecosystem in Cincy, and I was like, what about my friends? Like, how do I fix this for everyone around me? And I started a little meetup group. It was me and 10 other people. We started meeting at local bars and restaurants. And that was in, oh my gosh, it really wasn't that long ago. It was 7 years ago. And the 11 of us have since raised in the last 6 years a little over $120 million in venture capital. And that was just the meetup group. And so that's really how I started, and then eventually started Lightship Foundation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for just sharing that, just the breadth of your journey to get to this point right now. But with that, understanding that we have some people in the audience that might have various different knowledge and backgrounds related to just startup, business and economic development, and venture capital specifically. To somebody that might not be as familiar, how would you define what venture capital is?
So venture capital is just part of the financial capital stack. There are lots of different ways to put money into a company. Some people get small business loans. Some people get money from friends and family. There are different ways and different debt vehicles that you can invest. And for venture capital, we're investing in high growth companies. Companies that'll scale typically outside of the city that they're in. And any VC, venture capitalist, is looking for a return on their investment. Somewhere between 2x to 100 or beyond, right? For us, our target is somewhere between 3 to 5x. So if I put in $1 million, I want $2 million back in the next 10 years. If I put in more than that, that's, or less than that, it works on that multiple. And so depending on the vertical that we invest in, so you talked about the things that we invest in are consumer packaged goods and services, e-commerce, sustainability, artificial intelligence, and healthcare. In those spaces, each of those things has a different potential exit multiple. So healthcare is always much higher, usually 10x or more. Because the margins on that type of work are just much higher. CPG is typically a little bit lower, closer to that 2 to 5x range, unless it has a crossover with healthcare. So it's really about how far you can grow the business. For us, we're looking to make certain that any one company can return the fund. And so we have a $50 million fund, or at least half the fund. Let me take that back. So if we make an investment in a company, so we have a $50 million fund, any one company returns half the fund. So I want any company to give me back $25 million. So any investment I think about, I make certain that I can get half of that back. And so it's quite a mathematical equation on the back end.
Absolutely, for sure. And I want to kind of just piggyback on what you said in your initial answer, being only one of 88 black women that had received venture capital at the time. So could you just expand upon that a little bit more in terms of, what challenges you have faced, both as an entrepreneur seeking funding and now being on the opposite end, being a VC yourself?
Yeah, I mean, look, just a fact in the world is that we're in a country where assets are managed by one segment. So 98.3% of all assets managed in the United States are managed by a white male-led firm. That means that 1.7% of all of the other assets, venture and otherwise, are managed by white women and everyone else. Less than 1% of venture capital goes to a black-led company. Less than 0.2% goes to a black woman-led company. And so you can see, you chunk it down, and we're in a world of hurt. But there just needs to be a process of making certain that we get to a place where we can equitably start making decisions as a group, right? It's going to go from, I was one of the first 88. I'm the first Black woman venture capitalist in the state of Ohio. That's wild, right?
Y'all can clap it up for that.
And that took until 2022, right? The second Black woman, I hired, right? She's on my team. And that's how challenging it is. And we've got to figure out a way to work together to kind of solve those challenges. And I would say, as a state, I do a ton of work with Jobs Ohio, Ohio Third Frontier, and those are funding mechanisms that fund lots of things in the state, not just venture capital and kind of tech-based businesses, but really just any business, because Ohio's doors are open to business. And they've helped a ton to diversify the way that we use our tax dollars to make the entire state more equitable for all business owners.
Thank you so much for that answer. And just want to ask you a little bit more about that. What would you say is the current challenges or the current state related to equity, diversity, and inclusion in the VC community? And what are some of the bigger opportunities or things that you would like to see changed?
Yeah, I would say, first and foremost, all of us are, top of mind is the fact that we're about to go through a recession. We're technically, really close to it. We're just waiting for someone to say we're actually in a recession. And it's going to take a year before they decide, because there's a process to decide. And, a group gets together and does that. So, so we're all challenged by that. I would say, as someone who invests in, I try as much as possible to use really positive language. So we invest in remarkable founders that come from diverse backgrounds. For us, that means they're Black, Indigenous, they're people of color, they're people from the LGBTQ community, people who identify as women, and those who have disabilities. That is a lot of people. And we invest in diverse companies. They have to have a diverse board. They have to have a diverse team. I have white male-led teams that have have an entirely diverse team. And so for us, that's absolutely the process. But I think a lot of VCs, can you repeat your question? I got a little flowery there.
Yeah, no worries. What are other challenges in the VC community related to EDI, and what are some of the specific opportunities or recommendations that you have or that you lead from Lightship's perspective?
Yeah, specifically the challenge is that kind of 98.7% number, and how do we make adjustments? So there's got to be a lot of education around angel investing. So there's got to be that kind of first level of investment, which some people call a friends and family round. So, the gentleman who started Google out of their garage, a lot of that money came from friends and family. The unfortunate fact is people within our communities struggle with that. I know that for me, my father was an electrical worker at BP Oil Refinery. When I bought my first franchise, he went on with me halvesies. So he gave me $5,000. I put in my $5,000 and I started a stroller fitness business. Did really well. But not everybody's dad has $5,000 to throw in, right? Or 50 or 100 or $1 million, right? So we've got to figure out how we deal with that portion first. So that first level of kind of friends and family. And then there's angel investors. So these are just new people outside of that F&F. And there aren't as many diverse LPs and angel investors as there are everyone else. And it's just a consequence of educating people of the business opportunity of investing in high growth venture backable businesses, or just businesses in general. And in the Black community, we have typically put our investments in something we can see, feel, and touch, which is real estate. And so we've got to figure out a way to kind of switch that over, and there's a lot of organizations making an attempt at doing that. But there are orgs throughout the country, like 100 Black Angels with Rodney Sampson down in Atlanta, pipeline angels in New York that are making certain that women and people of color have the opportunity to invest at that angel range. On the LP side, or on the venture capital side, so kind of within a company, you have to, I believe, start diversifying analysts and associates, so the very top level, so the folks that are kind of getting inbound deal flow. So in any venture capital firm, we get inbound deals, so inbound companies. Trying to make certain I say all this right, because like not everybody has like a venture capital background. You get these inbound deals, and somebody reads them, and they decide whether or not they go on to the next level. Up until the last few years, that kind of like person that was doing the first read was a young white dude from a university, right? And that person was deciding what was a good idea and what was a bad idea and what they wanted to pass on. And so we've got to make certain that we diversify that first level, right? Because if we are solving the challenges of one group, we're not solving the challenges of all Americans, of all humans. And so I would say that's kind of like the first level. So we can fix that through internships. I've had internships that I've hired, and they've been with me 4 years. I just hired an intern that I had for a year. Her first job is with me. So I think that's the kind of first level. And then the next would be making certain that we have more diverse GPs, so general partners. For me, I'm an emerging fund manager. This is my first venture capital fund, though I have invested in the companies that sit alongside my foundation. So I do some other stuff. We can talk about that a bit later. But we have to have more decision makers who are at the investment committee level. So once Alexis on my team, who's our senior associate, sifts through and looks at all the deals, and I read all the deals too, and we read about somewhere between 1,700 and 2,200 a year, people who apply for funding, and we'll do 30 deals out of the $50 million fund, right? So we'll end up looking at about 6,000 deals to fund 30. So she brings them to me and to the rest of the investment committee, and we decide, what works and what doesn't. Our particular investment committee is 3 people. It's myself, my spouse Brian, who works for the fund, as well as Alexis. You need 2 votes to get through. Brian, my spouse, gets 1 vote. Alexis on my team gets 1 vote. If they pair up, they can pass it through. I get 2, so if you come to me and I say yes, you win. But that's, I think, how you could potentially fix it, is making certain that you have more diverse investment committees that have a structure such that more ideas can get funded. Because many venture capital firms work on unanimous votes. And when you have a unanimous vote, let's say you have 5 people who all sit at a table. No one is wearing their "I'm biased" badge on their shirt. But sometimes people just can't get comfortable with the deal. And they never want to name why they're not comfortable. But people like to invest in people that they know, like, and trust. And I totally understand that. I totally understand that, because it takes a lot of relationship building. But until we can kind of fix that, I think it's going to take making certain that we have more diverse kind of GPs. So a few levels: interns, associates, working through the GPs, and then eventually we can get to making certain that diverse communities have enough wealth that they can also be partners, limited partners, and invest in those funds as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that answer. And, kind of when I hear you talk about it, we see this issue with banks as well. I think there's a misconception that it's just all about the rigid numbers, but a lot of times your banker is able to push deals through that just was outlined on the paper might not get you through. So it is very critical about the relationship, and many times, as you're mentioning, the people that are interpreting the deals cannot connect with the minority-owned businesses.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of double down on that, like, with PPP, tons of businesses struggled to get any of that capital in, right? And many times it was because their books weren't where they needed to be. It didn't mean that they weren't running a successful business. It just meant that they couldn't fill out the forms. The forms were challenging for many. And banks struggled to put out the forms properly, right? Like, they had to figure it out and create portals for themselves. And so I just remember, like, oh my gosh, there were so many companies. So in Cincy, we have this consortium of organizations that support Black businesses and, well, all businesses. And we would get together and try to figure out, like, how many people are you taking through the process? Like, I know for myself, I took 8 folks plus our own organization, for our foundation, through the PPP process. And I did that alongside my business banker that I already had a relationship with, right? So I can text Carl from PNC Bank and say, hey, I need to do mine. Can you help me with these? And when I had a problem, I had someone I could go to. But some folks didn't have a relationship with anyone at the bank, right? They may have seen a teller at some point, but that teller isn't the person helping you with your loan. And so I think that was kind of one of the larger challenges, is that a lot of people waited until the last minute to create relationships, and sometimes you've got to network these things way in advance.
Yep, absolutely. And with that, just kind of talking about the gap in terms of entrepreneurial education, also know that you do things revolving around boot camps and accelerators. So can you just talk about that a little bit more in depth around your entrepreneurial education work?
Yeah, so back in 2016, after I started that meetup group, I realized that we had gone from 11 to like 75 people that were coming to this event within 5 months. First month we hosted it at Igby's, which is a restaurant downtown Cincy. Second month we ended up at Kroger's, 8451. We brought in one of the general partners of Intel Capital. He was making an investment in a local company called Listener that sends data over sound. And he came and spoke, and then by the 5th month, we ended up being at a gentleman's home named Dahani Jones, who was a former Bengal down in Cincinnati, and he sat down with me and he said, you should be doing more than a meetup group, Candice. Like, this is bigger than this. And so we sat down together with his other business partner, and we decided to launch what was at the time called Hillman Accelerator, named after the fictional HBCU from a different world. And so we went to the city of Cincinnati in the state of Ohio, and we said, you're putting tax dollars behind supporting lots of organizations. However, they aren't supporting us. Because when I went through one of the local accelerators, I was the first woman of color to go through any of the 8 accelerators that have been around for years. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, you guys, just look at the pictures on the wall. Like, I'm it. I can see it. Can you not see that one, like, chocolate drop in the middle? And, that's how it got started. So I went to the state. They ended up giving our first grant. And the city of Cincinnati matched it. And then P&G came in later that year. And they said, well, let's do a pilot. Let's see if this thing will work. And so we ended up investing in 3 companies, $100,000 each. We took them through a 12-week program. And within 60 days of them graduating from demo day, they collectively raised $2.2 million in venture. All 3 companies are currently running. One was acquired. One is a company called Solo Funds. They do peer-to-peer lending for small dollar loans between $50 and $1,000. That company's currently out in LA, and their lead investor is MasterCard. They make millions of dollars a year doing those loans. And the other is a premature infant warming blanket that reduces the need for incubators in resource-scarce settings. Basically, it's just this little, like, papoose with a warmer, and it saves babies' lives. And they're in about 27 countries. And so year 1 went well. And we said, well, let's just keep going. We did our second year, And then we decided to acquire NewMe Accelerator, which was the first accelerator for women and minorities in the country that was started out in San Francisco. So we acquired that accelerator, turned it into our boot camp. And we run a 3 to 5 day boot camp, all in a house. We rent Airbnbs, except for in Cincinnati where we have this amazing Frank Lloyd Wright that we run out of. And we, for those few days, eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner together and teach people the language of venture capital and entrepreneurship. So making certain that they know what they need to say and how they need to say it, because they already have a great business. They just may not be able to bridge the divide for language. And so we run the accelerator in Cincinnati, Detroit, and Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're expanding to 3 more cities in 2023. We run boot camps in 5 cities. And expanding to another 10 next year. It's painful. And then we run an online pitch competition called Twitch Pitch. We've finished 8 seasons of that where we take 12 companies, we put them head to head for a cash prize. We've done that with AARP, JP Morgan Chase, a few seasons with Target, Amazon Web Services, and Amazon. And I'm not busy at all. Let me see, what else do we do? We run something called Workflow Wednesdays, which is just that original meetup group that we do in multiple cities. And then we, at the top of the year, acquired Black Tech Week from our friends Felicia Hatcher and Derek Pearson down in Miami, Florida. They had run that conference, pretty cool. And they ran that for the last 7 years, and then we just ran it 2 weeks ago in Cincinnati. And it was an amazing experience. So that's what I do. That's what I do. So I run Lightship Foundation, and then I'm a general partner at Lightship Capital, and the managing partner there is my husband, Brian.
For sure. So I that actually was on my list to ask you. Talk more about just the thought process in terms of acquiring Black Tech Week, and what opportunities do you hope are on the horizon with that acquisition?
Yeah, so we have every year, so I have a very small board. It's just 3 folks. It's me and 2 amazing people. Nena Okuku, who was one of the founders of blackfounders.com, like the OG of the OGs. So if you know Chris and Monique Woodard and Nena, they all sat down in San Francisco a few years ago and said, hey, we want to make certain that we actually just shine a light on the fact that like Black founders aren't getting the same deals. And then they went into other demographics as well. So Nena sits on the board, as well as a gentleman named Maurice Coffey, who's an executive on loan for Procter & Gamble. He was on the original Swiffer founding team. Back when it was just a broomstick and a tissue, like in the corners. And every year, the board and I sit down and we say, what more can we be doing? Did we do enough this year? Did we do it to the best of our ability? Did we make a difference? And what more can we do next year? And so the first year we did that exercise, we looked out on the horizon and we said, okay, who else is out there doing this work? And we looked around and we said, okay, well, NewMe's out there. It looks like it's slowing down. It looks like Angela Benton, who is the founder, is doing some other things. Can we make certain that that legacy organization stays? Because there are always going to be people getting on the on-ramp. And so we talked to her and Brian, so quick backstory. My husband Brian joined the team at the end of 2018, so like 2 or 3 months before this acquisition. He had just recently sold his company to a private equity firm as a facial recognition company. We were engaged at the time, and then we got married a few months later. But he helped with that acquisition. He actually went through NewMe Accelerator. He was in class 2. And that allowed him to raise $13 million and get to about $120 million valuation. And so amazing companies went through NewMe. So he had an M&A experience, has M&A experience, and so he helped with that process. And so we made that acquisition and were able to quadruple our revenue as a foundation after that, which was really quite amazing, and increase the number of people we were supporting. And I think it's just important that we keep our legacy organizations around. They're really important for several reasons. One, they're really good at what they do. And two, people are always going to be, as I said, coming on the on-ramp. But also, the reason why some organizations fail that work with diverse entrepreneurs, and really just diverse groups in general, is the fact that they can never build capacity. And we, at that point, really focused on capacity building, making certain that we had, it is way easier. It seems hard in the beginning, but it really works. And so we did that. We were able to expand not only the capital that we were bringing in, but also our footprint. So we moved from Cincinnati, then into Detroit, and then again into Tulsa. And then on the Black Tech Week side, again, we saw that Felicia Hatcher was moving on to work for Pharrell Williams and Black Ambition Prize, well, and other things that he does too. And her spouse, Derek Pearson, was starting as a CEO of Center for Black Innovation in Miami. And we started actually talking to them in 2019 about the acquisition. They were not ready. And that was fine because, man, 2020 happened. It would have been a rough time to do an acquisition of a conference. But they got around to it. And so at the top of the year, we made the acquisition. And I think that, I think we did a really good job of executing on the conference. To be able to, and as we talked a little bit before this, like to offer the broader community, city, state, and kind of regional, what great Black tech companies look like, for everybody to be able to see that in some really iconic buildings. We hosted it at Music Hall, a Memorial Hall on Washington Park in Cincinnati. Our headliner was Serena Williams. We sold it out. Every night was spectacular. We had Roy Wood Jr. from Trevor Noah's show come and do a comedy show. Like, it was really cool. And we had 100 speakers. We did 70 sessions. We did it all over. And so we wanted to make certain that that legacy organization stuck around. And we'll continue to do that. I will not acquire anything before the end of the year, but yeah.
For sure, absolutely. Congratulations on all that success with that. And I want to talk about, you kind of talked about capacity building, which gets into considerations around sustainability, which, can be applied to foundations, nonprofits, businesses, and even personal growth as well. So as a founder or as an executive, how do you kind of discern when to expand an organization or company into new territories, or just to say, this is what we do, and these are the boxes that we want to be experts in, rather than just being, arguably good or decent in several different areas and chasing the dollar? Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, so in 2020, we sat down as an organization as we were still Hillman Accelerator, and we said, is this the name we want to stick with? Because at the time, there's some weird stuff that happened around like Bill Cosby and Hillman, and so we were like we can't really stick with this. And so we decided to kind of start looking for another name. And I went on you guys, I'm a crunchy granola kind of girl. I'm in my kayak. If I could just live in a tiny house with some chickens, I would do it. So I went to Northern Michigan, went on my own spiritual journey, and started going to lighthouses around the state, down the coast of Lake Michigan. And through that process, I learned about lighthouses and lightships. And a lightship is a lighthouse on water. It goes to travelers when they're having a challenge in the water, and find them and help them find their way back to shore. So I was like, oh, Lightship, that's the name. And man, I didn't have any sleep last night. Repeat the question.
If I could pull it back, yeah, I can't. It's
I do know the answer. Thank you.
There you go.
Man, I was doing so well. And I'm sorry, it's not your fault. I didn't have enough sleep last night, so I apologize.
Sure. No worries.
So we sat down with a consultant, a young lady named Susie Hendrickson. Susie runs a company called Holotype Studios, and Holotype just helps people to kind of distill down their business into kind of an easy way to look at it. They've done and worked with some amazing brands. I'm certain people around here have eaten like Hen of the Woods chips, and all that design is done through them. So she sat down with us and she said, well, what do you want Lightship to be? And she's like, you've already got Lightship Foundation, you've got Lightship Capital. What else do you think maybe in the next 10 years you're gonna wanna do? And I said, well, we definitely already build community, but we'd like to do that better. And so we've decided that as an organization, if it doesn't fit into capital or education that we do through the foundation or community, we won't touch it. And so you could probably think of things that we could do on the capital side. We could potentially, and I'm saying, like, I'm giving you just some ideas. I'm not saying we're doing this. Like, we could go and start working with the angel investors, and we could start educating that group. And we could start new education programs working with folks maybe outside of tech and tech-enabled businesses. And so if it doesn't fit within that Lightship education sphere or capital sphere or community sphere, that's when we say no.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And previously, you talked about Lightship looking at anywhere from 1,700 to 22 deals per year, but only investing in approximately 30. So, we do have a number of founders and entrepreneurs in the room. So, what type of advice would you give them in terms of making sure that they have all their ducks in a row, and specifically, what do you look for?
Yeah. So our thesis is around kind of geographic. So geography-wise, we invest in the heartland. So we say center of the country. We try to avoid New York, San Francisco, and Boston unless they have a nexus within the Midwest. And then we have a demographic focus, which I described already. And then we have individual verticals that we invest in: CPG, e-commerce, sustainability, artificial intelligence, and healthcare. And we have a stage that we invest in as well. So we say, and there are different terms for the Midwest versus coast and kind of different areas of the country, but for us, we are Midwest seed to Series A, and we can participate in a Series B. Now, what that means for the investment amount kind of varies. We typically look at companies that are approaching $100,000 in revenue per month or more, unless they're in a vertical where revenue isn't relevant, like in artificial intelligence. It takes a long time to get AI to work, to get the machine to understand what data it's reading. So it could be years before something does that. We look for a fantastic founder that can build a team. So there has to be a team already. Those do not, you can be a solo founder. Some of the investment committee is okay with solo founders and some is not. So we kind of figure it out amongst ourselves. But really that's mostly what we're looking for, with the exception of we do want to make certain that people have made an attempt to expand outside of their home region. So if you're from Dayton, have you tried selling or doing any biz dev outside of your city? Because sometimes what happens is somebody's like, oh, I've got this fantastic idea. And what they don't recognize is that there is someone in 25 other cities doing that same thing. I love meeting a founder like, I'm the first one to ever. And I'm like, man, I've read 2,200 applications this year, and I'm pretty sure I've seen this 8 times. Yeah. So those are typically what we're looking for.
Yeah, thanks so much. And then the last question that I'll ask you before we open it up to the audience is, given that we're still navigating COVID, depending on who you're talking to, we're currently in a recession or headed towards one. So how do you foresee all of that impacting business and economic development in DC specifically?
So the demographic I work in has always works in lean times.
Yeah.
So it's no different for us,
Yeah.
right? It's always famine. So it's just like not any different. We're just deploying capital the same way. I think that my majority peers are learning to figure it out right now because we've never had inflated valuations and we've never had people just giving us too much capital. So for us, it's business as usual. We're still fundraising. We're still deploying capital. We made an investment the Friday before Black Tech Week. We made an investment yesterday. And so those things are not stopping. We still have people investing in the fund and into Fund 2. Y'all don't talk about Fund 2. I wasn't supposed to talk about that. But yeah, it's not changed. I think that the one thing that has shifted for lots of folks is team and having enough high quality team members to work. And so I think the job market is affecting people quite a bit. I know that is something that we constantly are working on with our value creation team. So we have a team of people that help our founders with hiring, branding, design, biz dev, and just really technical work on the engineering side. And so that's, of all of the things, that is one of the larger challenges. But beyond that, many of us are kind of back to business as usual, with the exception of our companies that still are struggling with like supply chain issues or working with large retailers that may have changed their payment terms or something like that. No, just always the same.
Yeah.
No complaints.
For sure, appreciate that. So with that, I definitely want to turn over the opportunity for the audience to ask Candice some questions. We have a microphone here in the audience if anybody would like to ask something.
Nothing. There we go.
All right. Somebody's got to be first. All right. Hi, Candice. Sean Freeman. My question, well, first, love what you all are doing. I hate that I wasn't able to participate this year. I was out of town during the week. But my question is, are you all, and you may have answered, I came in a little later, are you all a majority minority employee company? And I asked that question, I did have a 30-minute session with Raquel. Raquel. I had a 30-minute session with her, and it reminded me of the gathering spot as far as like being professional, being a company that scales like super far, but is intentionally black. She's from the Dayton area, younger, but of course on her stuff, and just to interact with somebody that's younger and black and working for this like black-owned venture capitalist, fund was very unique. So that's what led me to asking that question.
Yeah, we are an intentionally diverse team. We have a Latina that runs the marketing department. We have a white male creative director who came to us from Landor and Procter & Gamble. He works making certain that we have diverse creatives around us. So the whole team that did Black Tech Week's video was a completely diverse group of people. So we are 90% women as a team, but a completely diverse squad. We make certain that we meet people where they are. So we just want to make certain that the people that we're supporting, they can find themselves on the team. And so there are members of the team from the LGBTQ community. There are members of the team from lots of different spaces. There are folks that have different disabilities or accessibility issues. And so we just don't want to run into the challenges that we've run into ourselves. And so I just don't want anybody to feel like they don't belong. Someone posted on my LinkedIn while I was on vacation that he was really upset that we were running Black Tech Week and how dare we exclude people. And, you know, I sent him a note on LinkedIn and I said, you know, also let's just like take this to DMs as well, but like just know that 30% of the attendees were white. 10% of the attendees were other, right? And 60% of the attendees were Black. And all of us enjoy going to Oktoberfest, right? All of us enjoy going to, I used to love going to the Polish, I grew up in the Polish village of Toledo, right? Like, I think it's okay to celebrate different cultures. It was not about being exclusionary. And for us, we don't exclude anyone from our team. But we do make certain that people are just kind of like customer facing the right way, right?
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question here.
I do apologize. I'm a little sick today.
That's all right.
My name is Rhonda Frost, and working and trying to, you know, on the head of the payment, trying to start a nonprofit in this city has been extremely difficult because there's not a lot of resources for nonprofits. What would you say? How can a person like me get into the accelerator program to try to find funding, to try to find those grants? Because a lot of people did do the PPP. Fortunate circumstances, I couldn't do the PPP. But I'm just looking for help type of deal. Like, where do you start? I found some investors, but not really many. They want to see how it goes. So.
Yeah, I would say, so we as an organization don't work with nonprofit orgs. We have allowed them to go through our boot camp program, which is that kind of shorter term. But because of the way that our funding is structured, we can't invest in an organization that we can't get a return from. But I will say that I'm fairly certain there are organizations, and I'll have to make certain I get you the correct name, organizations here in town that help folks with their nonprofits. Running a nonprofit is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Before the talk today, we discussed, like, you know, how do you do it? You just don't quit. Like, you just don't take no for an answer, or you just don't sleep. And for me, I worked my day job until this thing worked, and I worked on it from like 10 to 2 in the morning every day, making certain that we could run this accelerator, these groups. I bootstrapped our monthly meetup, right? I worked extra hours to buy pizza and beer for Black founders every month, or cheese, or I found a local organization who would sponsor that month's food. And we didn't start here. Like, I just gave you a long list of everything we used to do. We started with pizza and beer. Domino's Pizza and Junkie Beer, right? And we've gotten to Serena Williams in that many years. And it's just a process of not giving up, realizing like what your true north is for your nonprofit, and just not just not taking no for an answer, but being okay with the no, digesting the no, figuring out how you can readjust your sales and maybe how you're articulating the work, so that someone can eventually, because it can take a long time. So the story I didn't share was, I was like, oh, I went to the state and they gave me funding. No, you guys. Like, that's not really how it happened. What really happened was I went to a local entrepreneurship organization. They were funding all the other meetups. And when I went to them, they're like, oh, yeah, we don't have any more money and we don't have a problem with diversity. And I was like, that's not true. So I ended up going to City Hall and they're like, well, we already fund these other things. And I was like, well, you guys, it's not hitting us. And they're like, what do you mean? And then that city council member talked to State Senator Cecil Thomas. And unbeknownst to me, he went to the State House and got $250,000 to do a statewide study on the way that we spend our venture capital dollars. And that study showed that we are a super diverse state, but we aren't inclusive with our tax dollars at all in the VC space, in the tech space. And it was that study that said to the state, oh shoot, like, not only are we not investing wisely, but we also are missing a market opportunity, right? Because this is not charity. This is a gap in the market that if we fill, we as a country will do better. And so that process took almost 18 months to just get started with a pilot. And for the first 9 months of that pilot, my dad paid for my mortgage. So not everybody has that opportunity, but that's how it worked. And it wasn't easy. And in that first 6 months, one of my co-founders had to pay my light bill, right? But here we are. So it's hard. It's hard. And I don't want to sit up here and make it seem like it started here, because it didn't at all. And I got divorced, right? Because he wasn't trying to feel that either, right? And I got remarried. It all worked out. But it's just not easy.
Yeah, appreciate that. Absolutely.
How are you?
I'm doing really good.
We went to college together.
Bearcats, UC Bearcats.
UC.
But Karlos, great job, great platform. Welcome to Dayton, Candice. I'm sure you've been here a million times. But just wanted to ask, for the accelerator, is there a current waiting list in Dayton? And if not, in Cincinnati. And if not, how does one go about the application process? What steps do they need to take, or should they take?
Yeah, so all of our applications go through Lightship.Foundation. There's an Apply Now button. We read applications every single month and send out yeses, nos, or join us for something else, responses. So that is a constant process. We are on rolling acceptance, and yearly we do we have community conversations, so typically a showcase instead of a demo day. So all of our companies are at different stages of their business, and so we don't start everyone on the same day. And so it's rolling. It's really a constant thing. So we just had our Tulsa showcase in June. We'll have our Cincinnati showcase in October around Startup Cincy Week. And we did our final Detroit not too long ago. And so actually that location will shutter, and then we will open in 3 more spots.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Absolutely.
Hey, Candice.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Last time we talked in the airport.
I know.
But everybody, Candice is so accessible with her time. But let's go back to the 98%. You were talking about your fund, and we know the work that you've done. But how can we get the 98% of majority-owned venture companies to be accountable with metrics? Do some reporting out on how their deal flow is, being done. How many black firms did they see? How many did they invest in? Because the LP world is very quiet, very self-contained, but until it comes out into the sunlight, we can't move the needle. So what's your suggestion for metrics from the other 98%?
Yeah, look, people don't have to. That's right. So no one has to. There are some folks that are making pledges, and that's, I think, been helpful. There's a gentleman named Mike Venerable. He's at Cincy Tech. He was the second or third venture capital firm in the city of Cincinnati. And when I was standing up Hillman, he was like, I'm just going to follow you. You tell me what I'm not doing right. And we worked together. We did our first deal together in December. And he originally took a focus on bringing in women in entry-level positions. And so when we talked about it, we were like, all women? And now he's making certain that they bring in more diverse people to the team. And so I think it takes just people working together. I'm an optimist. I really do believe that most humans are good. I think that like the things that we're seeing online, the way that we're speaking to each other, many of these things are, look, we've always had racism, we've always had misogyny, we've always had issues, but it's never been so amplified. I think that when you get to a person one-on-one, when you break bread with them, you can fix a lot of things. So that's why we host our boot camp in a house and we eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner together, because you break down barriers. So if we get more people to eat meals together and talk about the things that they have challenges about, we'll fix them. We do that quite a bit. We're doing it actually in November in Tulsa, where we're bringing in, with a group called Build in Tulsa, 100 Black GPs, 60 LPs to connect over the course of 3 days, so they can all get to know each other. And it's a heavy lift. Doesn't feel scalable until it is, right? And that's kind of how I've always thought of things, is that you just do these like really tough things until they catch fire. But with all that being said, you do need to make certain that you hold pension funds accountable, because there are certain people that have to report. So there's the group that don't, and there's the group that do. I'll give a small example. There's a fund of funds that's currently located in San Francisco. They stood up this fund of funds just after George Floyd's murder. And their job was to take money from organizations around the country that were interested in funding Black and brown GPs. And University of Michigan's endowment is involved. A few state school pension programs are involved. And all of the money went out to San Francisco, and they started deploying this capital to diverse GPs. Great, but they have their own bias, because guess where they don't invest? The Midwest. Where's the University of Michigan? The Midwest, right? And so we're running into these challenges. And so we've just got to make certain that everyone who can be held accountable is. So I think that that's one space, so anything that's public. And then also, we're currently in a moment in time where we've got dollars being deployed for, to kind of grow the economy again. So through the State Small Business Credit Initiative, we'll start seeing money deployed for technical assistance, as well as venture capital dollars into funds around the country. This is the second, maybe third iteration of that. I know that during the Jobs Act, there was also an SSBCI push. That first push, though, was not advertised. So it was very much, if you knew someone, you got capital. And if you go back historically and look at all the data, you'll notice that very few diverse firms were included. And by very few, I mean less than 3 in the entire country. And there were a lot of organizations funded. And so this time around with SSBCI, which is currently coming online, 11 states will come online in the next 60 days. The Tri-Caucus got together and saw that original data and said, we see the problem. We're going to hold you all accountable this time. And so I think that some people are shining light now on those that can be held accountable. So, thank you.
Another question here in the back.
Hi, Candice.
Hi.
I could probably ask you a million questions, but I will not. My name's Camille Hall. I am the Business Services Specialist for the Dayton Metro Library. I am also the Director of the Young Black Professionals and Businesses of Springfield organization. So a lot of things that you're saying are definitely resonating with me with my work with entrepreneurs here in Dayton, Ohio, and also Springfield as well. I wanted to kind of pick your brain when you were mentioning having a support system of your family and not everyone having that. But I think that speaks to a larger point is that anyone who's made it anywhere has had help from someone. That being said, in order to, as you were speaking to, building the capacity of your organization and how that's related to the lifeline and the lifespan of the organization, it's going to take more than just ourselves as minority organizations, businesses, or what have you. We have to interact across the diaspora, across cultures per se. So I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on how you protect the values of your organization as a minority by identifying your choice of partnering allies, and how do you hold them accountable?
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I think we don't always get it right. Look, we are as a foundation and as a fund, we are a state-supported organization, right? Through Jobs Ohio, through Ohio Third Frontier. We're building a building in the University of Cincinnati's Innovation District right now. There are a lot of policies that have come through the current administration and past administrations that, quite frankly, don't jive with me personally and with my community. However, we work together through those things. I've spent a lot of time in Governor DeWine's office with Lieutenant Governor Husted, with the CEO of Jobs Ohio, JP Nassif, and we don't always see eye to eye. And what the Lieutenant Governor said to me one day, I came into his office. He's like, do you want to really know, Candice, like how to get this to work? Just, if you want this to work with anyone who you see as being maybe across the aisle, figure out what their needs are for their constituents. And you know what their needs are? Same as ours. Building jobs, building wealth, all of those things. And so when I'm working with my allies, I'm looking at what they're trying to get out of it too. The corporations we work with, look, I work with P&G a lot. Do you know what they want to do? Sell toothpaste, right? And so how do I help them sell more toothpaste? I can't force my culture on other people, but I can help people to build their businesses. I can build my culture within my community, and I can teach other people who want to be taught, but I cannot force it. But the fun thing was, a couple weeks ago, and I know this is a rambling question, when we had Serena there, lowered every barrier. Sport lowers barrier. But for her, we didn't talk about sport at all. I am uncoordinated at best. We talked about her venture capital fund, right? $111 million fund. She's deployed lots of money already. She's made 60 investments of her own over the last 9 years. And so for myself, I meet people where they are and then try to slowly inch my way into something bigger. It's not easy. Have I cried doing this work? Absolutely. Have people hurt my feelings? Absolutely. Have I been called all the words? Yes. But I still do it because not only do I have to feed my team and I have to feed my children, but I have like a lot of people that I have to help grow and help them grow their businesses. So, I mean, really to answer your question, like how do I keep, you know, the culture strong? I focus on doing the culture work with the culture and allowing other people to peek in when there are opportunities. And so we bring our allies in as mentors during boot camps. We had lots of people, we had a lot of people at Black Tech Week, which was so cool. I mean, we had 55 sponsors, and only one of those sponsors was a Black-owned business. And so it takes a lot of people to do the work, and we make certain that our partners are culturally competent. Like when they say things, we definitely gently and gracefully get them through them, unless it's like blatantly gross, right? But it takes a level of grace to do this work. And there are days where our team gets back together at the end of the day and we're like, man, that person was way off. Like, how do we fix that for them and for us? Because I don't, in my heart of hearts, know that no one wants to be a bad human. They just don't know any better. And yeah, there's always that one crazy, but like I think anyone can be turned once they know the other person. Most people won't get in your face and disrespect you. And I think you can turn anything for the most part.
Thank you. Have room for one final question. Well, with that, I'll ask you one closing question here. With all of the things that you've been able to accomplish, all of the things that you're still involved in and aspiring to continue to do, you know, and all the other entrepreneurs, I think in general, but particularly here in a westernized American culture that's kind of just a grind culture, where do you find the mental health and respite, or what advice do you have in that arena for, you know, founders and entrepreneurs, you know, as they're continuing to, you know, work, you know, 24/7?
Well, I don't always get it right. Let me start there. But for me, I have a couple of things that I don't move. So I take my kids to school every morning on the weeks that I have them, and I pick them up. And so that doesn't move. That's my family is that for me. I run. I've been a runner since college. When I ran the stadium, loved that. It was my favorite thing, Nippert. And running is my thing. I'm also vegan. And so what I put in my body helps to fuel my body. As I said, I kayak. And I've taken my email off my cell phone. I turn off my Slack on the weekends. My spouse doesn't do that. I live with my spouse that I work with, so that kind of like ruins work-life balance a lot. Because he'll wake up in the morning and be like, "Oh, you're up. I have this idea." And I'm like, "I haven't gotten to work yet, bro." Like, and I mean, it's not always been, I haven't always done it well. But for me, like, those are the things that I do. I have a block of time in the morning as just focus time. I typically don't set in-person meetings before 10 a.m. If somebody really needs me between 8 and 10, like, it would just need to be like Michelle or Barack Obama. But like, I'm not my best at 8 a.m. because I've got kids to get to school. I don't know. It's a continuous process for me.
For sure.
But I did take 2 solid weeks until today for Black Tech Week. It's my first strong vacation in a couple years. So it feels good. It feels good. You do really need to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Again, this was a Dayton Metro Library Social Justice Speaker Series, and it's part of Gem City Black Business Week in partnership with the Greater West Dayton Incubator and Launch Dayton Entrepreneurial Network. And we will have this available on our website, DaytonMetroLibrary.org/social justice. So, Candice, thank you again. If y'all could give me one more Dayton round of applause.
Thank you all for sharing your Saturday with me. I appreciate it.
And Candice will still be around to network and connect with people and answer any additional questions. Thank you all for being here.